along Border Street, the other public layouts for Margin Street. And we can compile all the data that we've gathered to date in between, so that we'll be able to establish a continuous map from Government Island all the way out to the Oaks, where we'll end it in this location. Mm-hmm. So the idea is it's sort of a three-part process. We begin with research, as I mentioned, gather all the latest title documents and layout of the public way, all the latest FEMA mapping that has continuously changing. It was most recently updated this summer. And also go along the route and pick up all the assessor's data so that we can identify all the parcel owners along the right-of-way. And then we'll send our field crew will go out and gather the actual physical evidence and do the survey, the on-the-ground field survey, with our robotic instrumentation and our GPS unit, and we'll gather accurate location both horizontally and vertically along the entire route. And then once we have all that data, then we bring it back to the office and process it and develop a base map that we then will deliver to you guys so that you can use it as a design guideline.
Are you going to look at the whole right-of-way around there? I mean, what particularly the right-of-way along Border Street?
Yes.
Well, the right-of-way along Margin, I guess, is key too.
Mm-hmm.
The right-of-way and certainly the way I understand it, and looking at some of these, is that people's property and what they are using as their property does go into the town right-of-way, particularly along Border.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
No,
I'll zoom in here just to show you a little bit about what you're referring to.
I know we're addressing that on Elm Street as well, as you know.
Right. So if we walk along Border Street here, you can see the right-of-way line usually comes into people's property, especially when you have a wide right-of-way. And as it makes its way around the corner here, across from the old Salt House, you can see that the right-of-way line comes fairly deep into to these folks. This is, again, this isn't, right down to the foot accuracy, but it's probably plus or minus a few feet. But you can see oftentimes driveways may come in. And the other thing that happens is we want to make sure that we have the latest, any takings that have been taking place because there's probably been multiple layouts over the past 100 years. And sometimes the county will come in and take land after the fact, or once the original layout was established. So that's something that we want to be mindful of. Sometimes it goes in the other direction too, but so and it gets very irregular in a lot of these areas, but these are some waterfront parcels that are actually pretty much just water, where people have docks before we get to the Lobster Pound and then pass over the bridge onto Government Island.
So the right-of-way through the Lobster Pound actually goes into the Lobster Pound that way?
Well, we'll have to see exactly. Just in this rough exhibit, it looks like it actually follows closer to the edge of the road, edge of the pavement. But across the street, it looks like it comes further into what you would think was private property, because the edge of the road is in here.
Yeah.
And the layout line is back in here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Then there's actually some talk about discussion with the owner of Mill River about putting the Harbor Walk from the Mill River Marina and a pedestrian bridge across to Government Island, which is something to contemplate. And Jackie, certainly your folks can think about how that might work historically, but I don't think there's ever been a bridge there, but some of the older harbor plans show a bridge across there, which might be interesting to think about.
So I'm going to zoom in again, and forgive me if this is a little rattling on your screen, but you're talking about something across here somewhere?
Exactly.
Wow, that would be radical. It'd be kind of cool.
Well, it would have to be high enough so that the boats could get under it, but I think it could be done. I mean, no large boats can go up there because, of course, they've got the Border Street Bridge to contend with. But it might be an interesting thing. Anyway, it's something that's been offered for us to contemplate, and we can look at that as we move forward. A lot of other things to get behind us first, but. So what is your timing on this, John? So
we'll start researching some of the initial field work within the next week, and then it's probably a couple months before we'll deliver a plan. Maybe at the end of the year, but maybe the first initial draft. We may be, we're getting into holidays and weather, but that's our goal, is to keep moving now.
Okay.
Get something hopefully drafted up initially by the close of the year.
Okay, that's great. Do you mind if we communicate with you from time to time to see how you're doing?
Of course not. Anytime.
Okay. Great.
Jim,
yes.
We thought we would extend the Captain's Walk, really based on George and Mike's suggestion, to Mariners Park, and include the boathouse and I guess it's the Maritime or the Coastal Research Institute's building. I don't know, that's not really a problem. We can always put a sign there, but I just wanted to let you know that that was their suggestion, and I agreed to it, or the committee agreed to it.
I think that would be wonderful if there is a pathway that goes over.
Well, there is, yeah. And that would kind of, actually, there is parking there too, which is another consideration. So the Captain's Walk could begin at Mariners Park and then go through Government Island and all the way around. It's a long walk for people because they have to go back too. But
it depends on where they start.
It's good for people, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Jackie. I think that's certainly something we should consider as we go forward.
And Jackie, this is George. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, George.
Yeah,
hello.
So thank you for bringing that up. I know we talked about, there being at least a harbor walk that goes all the way. I think there was some question about whether, the Captain's Walk and the historical aspect of it goes that far. But anyway, we're excited to do that. I guess question to John Cavanaro, is it significant to extend scope all the way to Mariners Park for this, or because that's all public land, is that sort of moot?
Well, everything, that's why we start with a definition of a scope, just so we're all on the same page. We started with the exhibit that Mike gave us, and then I talked to Jason. He said, why don't you continue on into the walk, but there is a thing called scope creep, and we'll do whatever you want us to do. I want to be upfront and honest with you guys that I put a budget together based on the number of days, and hopefully we'll hit it, and we're under.
But just thinking about that was, the town's acquisition of the Cohasset Colonials property, which I think is probably the entirety of Mariners Park, but, where it crosses from the Sailing Club over to Mariners Park, is going through the Eelgrass Marsh, and obviously it's very close to private property over there as it makes its way to Mariners Park.
I would say that let's see how we make out in this first initial pass through and all the data that we collect and the draft, sort of the initial plan that we come up with. Extending it, in sort of a linear direction is a lot less burdensome than maybe making it this wider and getting deeper into private property, and maybe, going further down Border Street, around to Parker Ave, things like that. But
well, I'm not sure it has to be really a physical structure. There is already a boardwalk or a walkway there. I was just thinking of conceptually including it in the Captain's Walk. I don't think it needs to, you don't need to have a sidewalk or anything down there. It's fine the way it is, but we need to kind of know whether to go ahead with an idea for a sign. The Historical Commission's job in this whole thing is simply to prepare signage for the Captain's Walk. And if we include Mariners Park now, we would have 10 stations, so to speak. And you don't, and I don't think that you need to worry too much about, you know, your engineering of a walkway. There's already a connection between Mariners Park and Government Island.
Great. Lauren, do you have a comment?
I do, yes. I'm just going to add that we do have a finite amount of resources that are allocated to this. And in terms of John's work, it adds hours and man time to the scope. So we're certainly happy to look into this. I would just recommend that John could take a look at it. And as things, if we need to revisit sort of from our scope and fee perspective, just stay in communication with Jason and I, and we'll have that conversation as necessary.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think Jackie's got it right. I think you know, it exists, and whatever we can do to make it more accessible to the public and inviting to the public, I think is great. Jackie, I would say one other thing. I think your and your colleagues' role in this whole harbor process is far more than simply putting up signs. I think we'd look to you to keep us focused on the historical nature of what it is we're doing, so that when we're doing the construction and the building and the, you know, a lot going on, we keep that in mind. And I do want to make sure that I introduce you to the people that will be working on the Mill River Marina and the Atlantica projects, so that they understand the historical nature of it, as well as, so that they don't get crossways with all of us about that. So we'll do that. I'll keep you posted.
Oh, okay, that's good. The other consideration that the Historical Commission needs to keep in mind is the surface of the Captain's Walk. Is it going to be, because the signs will be on pedestals and they are either in ground or surface mounted, and we have to know what the actual Captain's Walk that people will be following is going to be. Is it going to be kind of like a walk in a park where it's soft and you can put the pole right into the ground? Or is it more of like a sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk where you have to have a plate and mount it like that?
It will likely be many different surfaces, Jackie,
okay.
And we'll work with you on that. I mean,
okay.
Including if we ever get the pedestrian bridge, that will require a nice sign there as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for John? We don't want his billable hours to run up in a Zoom meeting. We want. So,
this is a free call.
This is George.
Yes, George.
This is George. So, John, will the output of your survey include any visuals that, you know, potentially we could use in a public forum just to show, you know, some of the results?
Sure, yeah. Our ultimate deliverable is a plan that we can produce in a PDF format, so that that's easily transferable, not just an AutoCAD file. And
great.
If that's what you're referring to, yeah.
I am. So it's something that, you know, we can use to inform the public as part of this overall effort. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Jason, you've been unusually quiet. Is your role simply to sit there and look pretty? Or are you engaged in this?
I'm here to sit and look pretty.
Okay.
We like to have our resident engineer and our consultant engineer on board for these discussions.
That's great.
I guess the only comment I would have is to people to understand John's scope is to just existing conditions. He's not designing the bridge or any of the walkway at this point. Right. He's just gathering existing conditions.
Right.
So the visuals will be existing conditions, visuals, no cross sections, nothing, just a planimetric. There could be cross sections done from it, but he's doing simply planimetric drawings of the project limits.
Yeah, that'll be his next contract to do the other. Okay, if there aren't any further questions, I'd like the CHIP agenda to move over to the resiliency initiative. So John, you're welcome to drop off, and Jackie, you can either do whatever you'd like, but we'd like to talk a little bit about the Harbor Climate Resiliency Initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, guys. We look forward to working with you as always. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of our members was actually interested in the flooding issue, so maybe I should stay on for a little bit.
You're welcome to. Absolutely.
Yeah,
This is an open meeting, Jackie. And,
okay.
And you are welcome to be here. George, do you want to start the conversation about the Harbor Climate Resiliency Initiative that we've got going here?
Yes, I do. And forgive me, I'm in a car on I-90 heading toward New York, actually in New York. So probably, my call will drop as soon as I hit the punchline. So I'll dial back in if that happens.
Okay.
At the Harbor Committee in mid-October, Harbor Committee proposed to sponsor a climate initiative. And actually, before I just blabber on about it, I can't see the screen, but would Lauren or Brianna be able to present the latest document that I sent out this morning?
Brianna is on it.
Yes, I'll pull that up.
Okay.
I'm also just going to note, I apologize, everyone. I do have to leave in 10 minutes to head over to my other 1 o'clock meeting.
Okay, Lauren.
Okay, well,
Lauren, I hope it's as important as this one.
It is.
Okay.
And let me know what.
It's up, George.
Is it visible? Okay,
yes.
Let me make sure that actually I can see it.
Are you driving and trying to navigate this?
No, luckily I have a very capable driver doing it.
Oh, good.
So yeah, I'm looking at it. But so the concept that Brianna's been just tremendously helpful in helping sort this through. So what we envision as part of this is not instead of what Harbor Committee and CHIP are doing. This is in addition, but is a Harbor Climate Initiative, and just working from the top. Our objectives are to gain consensus, prioritize, and inform action plans related to, climate-related issues around the harbor. And I would add, I didn't put in the objectives, but to educate. So there's, new and emerging research, particularly, around flooding and storm surge, which, love to be further educated on that. Very importantly, sort of from a very positive political point of view, is to complement a climate summit, which has not been announced by the town, but I think Brianna and others are very involved in setting up a climate summit in early 2022. So those are the two primary objectives for this climate initiative. Before I go forward quickly, Brianna, would you like to add anything about on that, or certainly regarding the town initiative?
Yes. So I was talking with Lauren about this yesterday, and we're hoping to meet with Chris next week to firm up all of these details. But what it looks like is, we can have these harbor conversations that are going to feed into the larger town climate summit event that'll include all of the community stakeholders. That'll be later in the spring. We'll talk with Chris next week about whether we should look into starting these conversations as early as December. If that's the case, it'll likely be online. We're not doing in-person meetings at this time. But then following that, if these conversations start up in the new year as well, and continuing on leading up to the summit, a series of different proposed topics taking place, that can help, as George kind of laid out, help gain consensus on what are the priorities and what we need to be working on, and just help garner support and things, and lay out the issues. I'm trying to think if there's any other crucial points I want to hit on. We would be looking to do the events in a public space, likely Wilcott Commons, but those details are still being worked out, as well as the timeline and full scope of this event. But basically, it is coming together. We just really need to get the details firmed up by the town manager.
Yeah, and that's great, Brianna. And I can say that I met with Chris this morning. We did discuss that. He is, as I said, he's got a few other things on his plate. So he really didn't want to focus too much on this. And what I assured him is that what we are trying to do is to start the, as George puts in quotes here, the conversations on resiliency of the harbor. And this includes many, many different subtopics that go with it. One of the things that Chris and I talked about is how we can get better jurisdiction over Cohasset Outer Harbor, which includes Bassing Beach, the eelgrass that's part of the storm surge mitigation. Jack Buckley is working with us on that. He's going to help from his standpoint and CSCR. And also the breakwater, which is actually one of the most critical parts of the infrastructure. And we're working on getting jurisdiction so that we can start to do an engineering review of the breakwater and then figure out where we're going to go from there. So there are a lot of moving parts here, but I assured Chris that I have asked both Lauren and Brianna to keep an eye out to make sure we don't conflict with the Greater Town Initiative, which is hopefully going to come together for the spring, but will contribute to it at the appropriate time. So that's where we are on that.
And just, can you hear me okay?
Well, you're beginning to break up a little bit.
Well, let me know. I'm gonna keep proceeding. So a key thing on the objectives is, when I say gain consensus, it is, yes, ideally among town citizens and experts, again, sort of a lofty objective, but very importantly also to accommodate, town leadership in that consensus, whether it's Lauren Lim, the select board, Chris Senior, because one of our objectives here is to, let's say, raise the profile of harbor resiliency and make sure there's the sort of political emphasis to go after the grants and to, commit the town employees and leadership along with Harbor Committee to take action on whatever findings we come up with. So consensus is sort of a big term there. And I just wanted to put that out there for comment. Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, that's great, George. I think that you've got it exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And I think to the extent, and Lauren, you'll have to advise us how we can do this without having you and Brianna spend an inordinate amount of time on this. I want to be able to work this along and make sure you both are aware of what we're doing, but not rely necessarily on you having to be completely involved in it, because I know you both have things as well on your plate.
And so, go ahead.
One thing to note too, I know we talk a lot about grants and whatnot for these climate resiliency things. The one thing you really need to consider too in these grants is who's the grant available to. Because I know BRIC grants come up a lot in the discussions about resiliency. BRIC grants are national grants. So everybody's eligible for them, including like Louisiana and poorer parts of the country that have much more significant climate resiliency issues than we do, and have a lot poorer populations. So those grants tend to go those directions versus to a town like Cohasset. It's going to get to Massachusetts. It's going to go to Boston first, then to Quincy before it ever gets to Cohasset. That's just a side note in the process that a lot of these grants may look great, but when it originally came up, I reached out to multiple different consultants and they said Cohasset would never get a BRIC grant. I mean, it would be next to impossible.
I think just to add on what Jason's saying is that, like, to clarify Jason's point, is that a lot of the grants, one of the primary factors of consideration they look into in competitiveness and ranking communities projects against one another is, does the community have an environmental justice population that's served? And that is a weighing factor in some of the ranking of a lot of these grants that we see. So that's what Jason's explaining right now. Yeah. And Cohasset just does not have a significant portion of environmental justice population for that criteria.
Thank you.
Well, I guess that's an important point. Some of these things are not going to happen without grants because the town of Cohasset is not going to be able to rebuild the seawall, and we're not going to be able to rebuild the breakwater, particularly. So if we don't get a grant, that breakwater will stay there, and virtually, if that stays the way it is, virtually everything else we do is moot. If that breakwater is not able to stop the major portion of the tidal surge, storm surge, then we're toast. as was pointed out this week, if you look at John Graken's boat down by the Cohasset Harbor Inn, that's what's going to happen on a more frequent basis.
I'm sorry, I do have to step out. I appreciate all of your time and looking forward to further conversations about these, but I have to go. My other meeting was actually in my calendar first, so I did accommodate this one, the rescheduling date. So I will let you know I'm trying.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Tim, I'm not saying we can't get a grant. I'm just saying we have to really look at them and determine, what's the viability of getting the grant and who are we competing against, type of.
No, I understand that. I'm sure it's going to be a long and involved process. I'm just saying that if we ever, as a community, come to the conclusion we can't get any money, well, why waste our time? Because we could have the best plan in the world, but if we can't fund it, then we're wasting our time. And I would,
Yeah, Tim, so I would agree with this, and I think Jason's really great. Again, this is George. Great to have your history and perspective on this. We are pursuing this under the expectation that at some point in the future, we'll be able to take some action based on, funding to be determined. One of the proposed topics for conversation, and Lisa Hewitt-Dick has been pretty focused on this, is to make sure that we are tied in closely with Joan Moschino and Patrick O'Connor in case there are, other funds available, like from the, American Recovery Act and some of the stuff that may pass through Congress, which, may be additional sources to be determined. But I think in any case, getting a broader understanding within the Cohasset community about not only, what are the major problems facing the harbor and helping to prioritize them. There's the breakwater, yes, there's, the town infrastructure. I think getting a better understanding of that so that we can prioritize 2 or 3 or 4 of those for action is one of the objectives of this series of conversations.
I agree. And then the benefit of that too is if you have that list of priorities, you can give that to a consultant that is a grant support consultant and give them the list, and they can say, oh, that project would fit this grant process. Yeah. And not be like, oh, we just want to do the breakwater, we're going to do brick, whatever. You know what I mean? Like if option number 3 is the best project to get funded, then maybe 3 becomes number 1 because we can get the money. But if we have a list, you provide it to the consultant, and they have people to track grants all year round, and they can be like, oh, this is the perfect project for this specific grant.
And Jason, while I've got you, one of the topics that we identified as a potential topic of conversation is really the focus on getting a better understanding of town infrastructure around the harbor. Things like the wastewater treatment plant, the water department, even the Elm Street, public safety building. Where I've seen the conversations over the past few months from folks like Tom Bell is looking at GIS maps. So we have, private citizens and committees looking at this. Do you think you or Brian Joyce would be can we ask that you potentially present at one of these conversations on, you know, to help educate the Cohasset population about exactly, you know, your perspective on the location, for instance, of the sewer treatment plant and other stuff. I think it'd be great to have you if you're willing to do that.
Sure, somebody. I'm not saying there's the sewer one I might leave to the sewer commissioners because I don't want to speak for them necessarily. I personally have concerns about the sewer treatment plant location, but I don't know that my fears are as well received by some of the members of the sewer department. But I think, yes, you could definitely.
Right.
Yeah, and actually that is our thought, and fully expect there to be differing opinions. That it would be surprising if there are not differing opinions on that. So I think that could be a very interesting topic. So to have the water department and sewer department speak for themselves about, you know, where they are and how they deliver services and whether they perceive any risks from, you know, harbor resiliency.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And at the appropriate time, we can certainly get Bill McGowan involved in that. I'm sure he would be happy to participate.
Yeah. So, you know, without going through this whole document, that's the real concept is to have these public forums. I think, you know, it's not trivial to schedule them. Brianna has offered to offer her full assistance to get them scheduled. I think, Brianna, we've discussed it. Harbor Committee is, you know, me, Lisa, others are perfectly happy being the primary facilitator once they're scheduled and making that happen. But you know, really what's next, so I've had a comment period this week. I have gotten feedback, and you know, a next step is to get the first one scheduled and actually to have ideally 2 or 3 scheduled. And you know, we're very cognizant of holidays, of the town's own special meeting and other schedules, because it is important that we, you know, get the attention of town officials as part of these so they can listen in and be part of the conversation, you know, and not have to, you know, choose or conflict with special town meeting and other things that are upcoming. So that's part of the scheduling considerations.
Yeah, I think it would be good to pick a time for the first one, even if it's just kind of a, you know, hear from the stakeholders and be able to perhaps modify the agenda and the conversation topics that we're gonna be looking at. I think that would be good, and start to get the whole town and particularly the major stakeholders engaged in this discussion.
Yeah. I'd really like to get it going this calendar year so that, you know, we're rolling into 2022, you know, with some momentum. So that's my objective coming out of today. One other thing I'd like to point out that came out in feedback this week is, you know, I got a question of, with regard to the scope, you know, is the scope really defined precisely by the municipal harbor plan? And my answer to that is I modified the scope of this perspective to say it's guided by the municipal harbor plan, but also informed by, you know, very current and emerging research. You know, as we discover new things, and the harbor plan is already, you know, some of the information in there is 18 months old. You know, if new stuff's coming along that informs harbor resiliency, this is an opportunity to put that forth. I just wanted to clarify that and ask for comment as well.
Absolutely, George. No question about it. That's great.
Okay. So I'll pause there. Are there any, you know, we welcome additional feedback, but, you know, I want to sort of move beyond we agree on the plan, and I'm going to put this out to Harbor Committee more broadly. Agree on the plan, and now let's start executing on this initiative is where I hope to be, you know, in the next few days. Start really getting the execution and the first of the meetings planned. Are there other comments?
I think this is great, George. thank you for doing it. And, thank you, Lisa, for helping with it as well. I think this is a great first step, and I'll be very interested in what we pick as a date and time. And can we have this in person, Brianna? Are we? I mean, this would not be a town committee meeting. It would be a separate thing. I mean, we are having some in-person meetings, I know.
Right. Ideally, we'd be able to have it in person. From where things are now, they're prioritizing trying to get certain groups back in person. So I'm not sure if they'll be able to hold these events in person or not. I don't know what the status of everything happening at the town is, but it sounds like we'll be able to consider in person for the new year. So I don't know. I don't think we'll be able to do in person before then. And I can't guarantee we'd even be able to do it after. We don't know how anything's going to end up anymore. But
here's just a thought. And the Old Goats had their meeting at Wilcott Common in person, and heard speeches and talks and discussions. This is not an official, as George has pointed out, it's not an official town committee or even working group. So it's a different type of beast. So if we were to have it at the sailing club and invite the constituents to it, would that be appropriate? I mean, that's a rhetorical question for you, Brianna. I'd see if you could find out whether that could fly.
So I had talked to Lauren about that yesterday, and she doesn't believe we'd be able to do that, but we're going to talk to Chris Senior next week about it more, and just double check that, because we're not sure if, since it's a town sponsored event, we believe we need to follow town rules and things like that. It's not necessarily open meeting laws the same as a committee meeting, because this will be more of a public forum style, but we'll need to adhere to, regular safety precautions and things like that.
I got it.
Tim, I hate to say, I have a lot of anxiety about this concept of meeting in a big giant group. That's just me. I hate to say it. I still don't want to be in a giant room with a bunch of people. That's just
okay. Well, wear a mask, Jason.
I do wish we were at the point where I could confidently tell you we should meet in person, because this does seem like a great engaging conversation. I'd love to do it in person. Hopefully things will be in a better standing for that in a few months, but we don't have, I'm not saying we should not hold conversations until that point. We'll just, if we do it sooner than those restrictions are lifted, we have the online capacity, and you'll have Zoom support for it.
Okay. Well, let's get a date and move forward.
Tim,
Yes, George.
Yeah, I'm confident. We can roll with what we need to do. I've seen, even the Elm Street corridor discussions that have been public forums. Those, they're not perfect, but they've been effective, and they're all run via Zoom. So I'm confident we can move forward, and I also do think, the certain advantage of running this from Harbor Committee and talking to Jack Buckley at CSCR, we can take this tremendous knowledge that's out in the private sector or the not-for-profit sector and now connect it to the town. And I think it's going to give us more leverage, and the execution to do it in our official capacity under the town. And I'm excited about that.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to object. I just, it would be nice to get together in real time. And Jason, if we do it at the sailing club, you can sit out there on the deck and listen. Anyway,
I have unvaccinated kids. That's part of it too. So I have to worry about my kids now.
Of course you do. Of course you do. I have to worry about my granddaughter. You'll get there someday.
You can get them vaccinated as of age 5 now, I think.
Yeah.
I got 2 3-year-olds, so no go.
Yeah. Not old enough yet. Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Tim, I just have one thing to add, actually, going back to the Captain's Walk, is I don't know how you're doing on grants and funding for that. But I visited the Mass Audubon Society in Marshfield, And the woman there was very knowledgeable. And she said that for the Captain's Walk, we should consider applying for a Mass Trail Grants program sponsored by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. She said she did that for the Audubon Society's walk and was successful.
Terrific, terrific. Great idea, Jeff.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, park grant's another one we talked about trying to tap into for the Harbor Walk.
Yeah, well, apparently this would be an appropriate project for them to fund.
Yeah.
Jackie, could you just repeat who is the sponsoring
Yes.
organization?
The organization is the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. It's just Mass DCR, it's known as. And they have a Massachusetts Trail Grants program.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Terrific. Any other thoughts or comments? Or George, I really appreciate you doing this from your Uber. You've got a good Uber driver.
Very understanding Uber driver here.
Great. Well, good. Well, check in when you get back to Cohasset. And in the meantime, thank you all very much. And thank you, Jason, for your engineering, and Brianna for guiding this thing. Your input is terrific. And you certainly both seem much more with your feet on the ground than the town manager at this point. He's about to come unraveled, I think. But anyway, thank you all. And we will keep you posted, and good luck with your children, Jason. Keep them safe.
Thank you. Have a great night.
So long.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.